woke up the other morning, nowhere in particular to be, and kind of just laid in bed for 20 minutes. Something weighing heavily on my mind. Midnight Sun gave us Twilight from Edward's perspective, and with this came confirmation of the knowledge that Edward is very heavy. I had surmised this already from various scenes throughout the Twilight series, including the baseball scene where Edward and Emmett crash into each other and it makes a noise like thunder. But Midnight Sun adds just a bit more clarity. In the meadow scene, Bella is holding and examining Edward's hand. And in Edward's narration, we learn that he's essentially having to help her by moving his hand himself. He says that it would take quite a bit of effort for Bella to be able to heft even just his hand. While this does add more clarity as to what Edward weighs, it's still not enough. So I decided to team up with my old nemesis, math. Bella is a teenage girl, and we don't know exactly how tall she is, but I think it's safe to say that she is fairly slender with not a lot of muscle tone. Bella is seated in a relaxed position, and I can only assume that Edward made his assessment that she would have difficulty lifting his hand based upon their current circumstances. With that in mind, I am going to make a bold guess that Edward's hand and forearm weigh about 20 pounds. My mom used to have a small dog that got very fat and ended up weighing about 20 pounds, and I could pick up this dog from a seated, relaxed position, but it would take quite a bit of effort and would not make for a smooth gesture in a romantic setting. I also tried to look up the average height and weight for men in 1918, the year that Edward died, but I couldn't find any surveys or studies conducted on measurements that were taken that year. But a report from Millicent Hathaway from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, published in the 1959 Yearbook of Agriculture, does note that data were gathered on the height and weight of men between the years 1900 and 1908, and then again in 1955. Now, based on Robert Pattinson's height, if Edward were 6'1", then the average weight for that height from data gathered from 1900 to 1908 would be 170 pounds. So trying to calculate Edward's overall weight depends on trying to calculate the weight of his hand and forearm. However, here is where things get difficult, because in reading the scene, I cannot tell if Edward is resting his elbow on another surface, which would reduce the weight of his forearm and hand. A fascinating report titled Weight, Volume, and Center of Mass of Segments of the Human Body was published by Charles E. Clauser of the Medical Aerospace Research Laboratory in August 1969. This report was specifically created for NASA to help determine, the density and weight of different body parts, considering that in July of 1969, the Apollo 11 had just landed on the moon, and NASA was pretty eager to get more humans up into space. In this report, researchers dissected 13 male cadavers and weighed their different body parts. And the report makes note of a study that was conducted in the late 1920s measuring specifically the weight of male hands and forearms. So that at least gets us closer to 1918. Isn't this exciting? That research found that the mean percentage of weight of a man's hand compared to the rest of his body was 0.703%. And for the forearm, it is 1.818%. Great. I just want to note that's mean percentage and not average percentage in case you are following along with the math at home, but please don't do that because I'm making a lot of assumptions. So the total percentage of hand and forearm would be 2.521%. So at a weight of 170 pounds for the average man, that would be 4.29 pounds. So for Edward Cullen, if the weight of his hand and forearm without resting his elbow is 20 pounds, then Edward Cullen weighs overall 795 pounds. However, if Edward Cullen was resting his elbow to take some of the weight off his hand and forearm, then it might stand to reason that perhaps they would weigh 40 pounds, in which case Edward Cullen's weight would be 1,590 pounds. But I'm not done yet. I also weighed my own hand and forearm using a food scale in the kitchen.
Oh, I miss happy hours.
And according to the scale, with my hand resting on the scale and my elbow resting on the stove, the weight was approximately 1.4 pounds. Therefore, my hand and forearm, elbow resting, is 1.17% of my overall body weight. So if we extrapolate the data using that figure with the assumption that Edward's hand and forearm elbow resting is 20 pounds, then that means that Edward Cullen weighs 1,710 pounds. Now, I will be the first to tell you that there are a lot of variables here. Edward's hand and forearm may weigh more or less than I guessed. He may or may not be resting his elbow, or he might think that a considerable effort for Bella would be trying to lift like 5 pounds because she's just so weak and frail. If you're a mathematician, team up with your best mortician friend, work through the data, and post the real answer in the comments below. I do think it's likely that Edward weighs around 1,500 pounds because condensed into the body of a 6'1", 17-year-old male, that would give him roughly enough pound force per square inch to perform the feats of strength that we see.
As if you could fight me off.
And according to the National Wildlife Foundation, grizzly bears can weigh from 700 up to 1,700 pounds, and the Cullens are regularly hunting bears. Mountain lions are much smaller, according to Carol Baskin's Big Cat Rescue. Depending on if they're male or female, an adult mountain lion can weigh between 75 to 250 pounds. With that in mind, vampires should never go into an elevator together. Can't use a trampoline. This does explain why you never see vampires on a roller coaster.